Good morning, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chant.
Good morning.
Could we start by having your full name, please?
My full name is Michael Harold Chant.
My name is Afra Bruce-Jones, and I'm going to be asking you some questions on behalf of counsel to the inquiry. Can I ask that document UCPI 36660 is brought up on the screen? Sir, that's A1 of your bundle. Mr. Chant, is it correct that you provided the inquiry with a witness statement dated the 19th of January 2024?
That's correct.
Can we move to page 56 of that document? Thank you. Can you confirm that that is your signature, Mr. Chant?
Yes, I can confirm that.
And is this statement true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is.
Thank you, Mr. Chant. All of your witness statement is now in evidence and will be considered by the Chair alongside the oral evidence that you give today.
Okay.
Mr. Chant, is it correct that you are currently the General Secretary of the Revolutionary Communist Party of Britain, Marxist-Leninist?
That's correct.
If you don't mind, I'm going to refer to the group as the RCPB-ML throughout these questions.
That's good,
right.
yeah.
When did you become the General Secretary?
Well, actually, there's a question of leadership of the party. We haven't always had a General Secretary. And from our third Congress of the party, which was in 1999, I increasingly took up leadership duties. So it was formally consolidated that I should be General Secretary in a subsequent period. And it's actually in the record when that was. My recollection is that it was around 2005, something like that.
Thank you. Would it be fair to say that you became involved in the politics of the RCPB-ML as a young graduate who'd moved to London, I think as a composer, to meet and work with a man named Cornelius Cardew?
Yes, that's right.
And I think it was through Mr. Cardew's experimental music class at Morley College in the late 60s and early 70s that a group called the Scratch Orchestra was formed?
Yes. The Scratch Orchestra is famous or infamous for its experimental music. It was groundbreaking for its time.
And were you a member of the Scratch Orchestra?
Yes, anyone who turned up was a member.
And is it right that the Scratch Orchestra joined with the English communist movement, Marxist-Leninist, around 1971?
Not strictly. There was no joining of the two organisations. Members of the Scratch Orchestra became aware of English communist movement, Marxist-Leninist, through its experience of, I mean, it's covered, I think, but it had a tour of. It was based on taking music to village halls, and it took its music to the northeast, supported by funding from Arts Council of England, as it was then, and this coincided with certain orchestra members having come into contact with the English communist movement. So there was no formal joining. It's just that quite a large proportion of the Scratch Orchestra became interested in the communist movement, English communist movement, Marxist-Leninist, and that in fact the majority of the active Scratch Orchestra musicians became very political at that time. We're talking about 1971.
And do you include yourself as one of those members who became very political at that time?
Yes, I believe I was quite slow in gravitating towards the politics. But once I had done, then I remained pretty stalwart.
You have set out in your witness statement at section 1 a very clear chronology and explanation of your movement into the English Communist League. But can I ask firstly, is it correct that you became involved in the Communist Party of England, Marxist-Leninist, in 1973?
Yes, as quite an activist in 73. In 72, I think I'd attended meetings and so on and become interested. There was the activities, which I think I mentioned, of the Progressive Intellectuals Study Group, which was a really exciting discussion group. And so it was 1973, I think, when I became what you'd call an activist of the party.
And at that time, that group was called the Communist Party of England, Marxist-Leninist. Is it correct that in 1979, the group that we refer to today, the Revolutionary Communist Party of Britain, Marxist-Leninist, came into existence?
Yes, it was, we say that RCPB-ML was founded in 1979. It was like a continuation of Communist Party of England, Marxist-Leninist. So there was a conference on March 16th, 1979, in which RCPB-ML was founded.
At the risk of oversimplifying the politics and the history of it, is it correct that when you were involved in the Communist Party of England, Marxist-Leninist, in 73, the party was based on Mao Zedong thought alongside Marxist-Leninism, and that you would have been considered Maoists to those engaged in the movement at that time?
Yes, I mean, that is a quite accurate assessment. We did, like the way you put it, that it was based on Mao Zedong thought alongside Marxism-Leninism is the way we would characterize it. I mean, it's worth noting that I think that like the activities of the party were not really to go around saying everyone should follow Mao Zedong thought. It was taking up issues such as the national liberation struggle in Ireland, various Afro-Asian solidarity campaigns, and so on. Yeah.
Thank you. When the party became the RCPB-ML, was there a change in the thought? Were you still following the Mao Zedong thought with Marxist-Leninism, or was there a change in that?
It dates to before then, actually. I recall from some of the disclosures, I think, that I believe there's one on subversion, which referred to Marxism-Leninism the groups formerly known as Maoist were now known as Marxist-Leninist. And I don't think that's quite accurate in the sense that it kind of suggests that there was that continuity, whereas we were kind of aware of some of the issues of Mao Zedong thought, which didn't really coincide with our thinking and how we saw Marxism-Leninism. So that is, you could say, dating from 1978, so it's before the founding of RCPB-ML.
Thank you, that's helpful. Can we bring up the document again, UCPI 36660, it's your statement, Mr. Chant, and can we go to paragraph 2.14? Sorry, should have got a page reference for you there. Thank you. So, paragraph 2.14, Mr. Chant, I'll just read. You describe here, I think, the aims of the RCPB-ML. At its formation, the RCPB-ML saw its aims as building an organisation that would be for and part of the working class and oppressed people's movement for revolutionary change and the socialist transformation of society. The RCPB-ML had a membership and form consistent with the Leninist principles of a party of a new type. Could you just explain for us what that last sentence meant in terms of what the membership and form of the RCPB-ML would look like?
Yes, at that time, I mean, first of all, I think one has to remember that this was a period when, I mean, there was a lot of political activity, when one could say that the revolutionary movement was kind of recognized, and so the old parties, which have changed over time, it has to be said, in terms of how they engage with their membership and whether membership decides everything. So it was important to us to reaffirm that it was what Lenin had said, that in this overall era of what we would say was the era of imperialism and the proletarian revolution, that a genuine Marxist-Leninist party, as we insisted on at the time, should follow that those Leninist principles. So that means that it's a party which had discipline, which had the involvement of its membership in decision-making, which was based on democratic centralism and so on. So I think that kind of covers what we were concerned with when at the founding conference of RCPB-ML.
Thank you very much. Can we now please bring up document number MPS 0747710, and sir, this is at A2 of the HN19 bundle. The RCPB-ML was infiltrated and reported on by undercover officer nominal HN19, cover name Malcolm Shearing. Do you remember Malcolm Shearing, Mr. Chant?
Yes, I do, yes.
Can you tell us what sort of role, if any, did he have in the RCPB-ML?
He became quite an activist, mainly in South London, and his reports tend to focus on South London. One can say unduly, in the sense of the party was a national party. It was particularly active in East London as well, for example. So he was very active in South London. He mentions Tom Graham as, I believe he uses the term, his mentor. So he was a protege in that sense of Tom Graham. He joined the work of mainly selling the paper Workers' Weekly, particularly as it was South London at Brixton Tube every week. Possibly there was also a program of pub selling. He might have been involved in that, but I can't be sure about that. Certainly he would sell the paper at Brixton Tube along with Tom Graham. But my recollection is that he didn't really join in the political discussion an awful lot. He was regarded as quite useful in the sense that he had a vehicle, and I think he mentions at some point that in effect it's like he became Tom Graham's driver. Tom Graham was one of the older comers in the party at that time, but he was. I can speak some more about Tom Graham because it comes up in HN19's witness statement also.
Perhaps you could just tell us what was Tom Graham's role within the RCPB-ML?
He was very much just an activist and very active in South London. His background was that he was born in Edinburgh in 1918. As a young teenager, he'd found his way to London. He tried to go to Spain in 1936 to participate in the International Brigade's struggle against Francoism and so on. But his trade was as a building worker. But at heart, he was also very much an author, and a lot of his activities in the party were along those lines. He wrote a number of plays, and some of the activists of the party participated in them. At the time we're talking about, it's quite interesting that in 1978, I think it was, when there was a by-election, Lambeth Central by-election, I think, and one of our comrades stood on the Democratic platform. His Tom Graham's address was used as the election headquarters.
I see. So it'd be fair to say he was a very active in the group.
Indeed, yes.
And therefore HN19 Malcolm Shearing seemed to spend a lot of time with him.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
I want to take you to part of Malcolm Shearing's statement where he makes some comments about the reasons for his deployment into the RCPB-ML. Can I ask that we go to paragraph 57, which is at page 22? Thank you. So it's actually sort of the second half of that paragraph. I'll read out the section. He's talking about why he had decided to target the RCPB-ML. He says, the RCPB-ML was small and very extreme, used petrol bombs and had taken up allegiance with Albania. Without getting involved in political discussion, it seemed to be a very extreme organisation in their behaviour. If taken seriously, their plans for how to run British society were very extreme. Firstly, Mr. Chant, what do you say to the allegation, I guess, in this part of HN19's statements that the RCPB-ML had used petrol bombs?
It's not true. And there was... There are some other parts of his statement as well which kind of indicate that Tom Graham has suggested that the party had used petrol bombs in the past. He doesn't give any evidence for this apart from the hearsay. In fact, as I recall, he says that he had no idea what the context of this and what this referred to. Our view has always been that these kind of one could almost call them terrorist activities. This kind of violence we wouldn't engage in. It wasn't appropriate. And I think it might be said that like a couple of conversations with Tom Graham that he mentions in the pub after activities doesn't amount to evidence for that.
What about the second suggestion that the party had taken up allegiance with Albania? I mean, it's correct, I think, is it, that the party had aligned itself with Albania? And are you able to briefly explain why?
Yes, certainly. First of all, I would say that it's not really allegiance we're talking about, in the sense that we'd always, as a party, decided on our own path.
Yes.
There was, as part of our considerations, you could say, about fraternal organization, fraternal relations with other parties, other countries, and so on, that we'd found that, well, first of all, this was our what we would call proletarian internationalism, to say that we fought on the same fronts for a new world, for, as we would have said then, for socialism and communism. In 1978, I believe it was, Enver Hoxha, who was leader of the Party of Labour of Albania, wrote a book which was very influential, called Imperialism and the Revolution, which took issue with certain concepts of what was known as Maoism or Mao Zedong thought, or the stand of the Communist Party of China. But it wasn't that, if you understand what I'm saying, it wasn't that we then said, oh, we are going to have our allegiance changed from China to Albania. The allegiance isn't the word we would have used.
I understand.
Does that explain
Yes.
it?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chant. Can we move, please, to paragraph 65, which is at page 24? A bit further up, sorry, it's not page, that's it, page 25. Just briefly read this bit. The justification for deploying into the RCPB-ML became clear to me initially as a result of my research into the group within special branch records. Although small in numbers, the special branch records indicated a track record of conspicuous violence on the streets and political extremism. Now, Mr. Chant, you've already explained that the suggestion in this statement that the RCPB-ML had used petrol bombs is untrue. What do you say to this suggestion that there was a track record of conspicuous violence on the streets?
Well, once again, I think what this is referring to was our stand on the promotion of neo-Nazi type organizations. And it was our stand that there was like a campaign to try and make such parties like the National Front into respectable, legitimate political parties. And I think, as I mentioned in the witness statement, it was 35 years, I think we said, after the defeat of the Nazis and the Japanese militarists, the Axis powers in World War II. And it's interesting that one could say, looking at that history leading up to the formation and promotion of the National Front and similar organizations, that this issue of extremes had been really promoted as a way of looking at the world. That there was, I think we take issue with the fact that there's an extreme left and an extreme right as the motive for our existence, or the motive for opposing the National Front. It's much more what was happening in society, in the world, and particularly in politics in Britain at that time. So the question of extremism and violence on the streets. Yes, we took a stand that Nazis have no right to organize, but the battles that took place were going back to an earlier time, but 1974, when Red Lion Square took place, when the anti-fascist movement in general took a stand that the National Front should not be allowed to meet in Conway Hall. This was placing ourselves as a block to them doing so. And in confrontations, yes, in Red Lion Square, it was the student Kevin Gately that was killed, and I think it's fairly recognised it was by police truncheons. So I think that's, in terms of violence on the streets, that is what is being referred to, and it wasn't like, unlike some of the other organisations on the left, as they were called, just confrontation with the so-called extreme right, the far right, for its own sake. I hope that makes it clear.
Yes, thank you. The last thing I want to look at in this statement is just a bit further down in this paragraph. HN19 says the following: the RCPB-ML's motivation was subversive in that they wanted to overthrow parliamentary democracy, establish a dictatorship of the proletariat, and so establish a one-party state. He does go on in that paragraph to say that towards the end of his deployment, it was his view that the RCPB-ML were diminishing, and therefore his deployment into the group wasn't the best use of resource. But just two things. Would you agree with the characterisation that the RCPB-ML wanted to overthrow parliamentary democracy?
Well, as I think I say in the Whitmer statement, it's like the parliamentary democracy is kind of overthrown itself. Like going back to the sort of Leninist conception that we talked about earlier, I mean, it's useful kind of to bring that up to date, if you like, when there is a sense that the electorate, the people as a whole, are kind of disempowered from decision making, from the influence on the political life of the country and so on, by the very fact of this parliamentary democracy. And it's not a sort of new concept. One can date it back to the English Civil Wars, the establishment of the Commonwealth under Cromwell, the debates so-called Putney debates on the nature of democracy. So it's not some peculiar conception of RCPB-ML. The document, I'm not sure, like the authorization of the document, who its author is, I mean, on subversion. It kind of, HN19's testimony is in line with that kind of definition, I think, of subversion. Dictatorship of the proletariat, yes, I mean, it's of its time also in like the late 1970s, the early 1980s, that we would keep emphasizing this necessity for capitalism to be transformed into socialism, and you have dictatorship of the proletariat. We wouldn't describe that process, that accomplishment in the same way these days. I mean, partly because the issue of dictatorship has other connotations, you know, especially after the 1930s with Hitler coming to power and so on. And the issue of a one-party state, this is HN19's interpretation. We never talked about a one-party state. In fact, our position became elaborated in what we term as the guiding principle of our party today, which is that of working for democratic renewal. In other words, it's a stand that it's not parties that should come to power, as it is under parliamentary democracy. It is that people should be empowered to have political control, and such divisions as exist can be overcome if there are new forms developed in order to empower the people and for them to speak in their own name.
Thank you, Mr. Chant. That's very helpful. We'll move on to a new document. Can we please bring up UCPI 17236? So this is at tab B15. This is an intelligence report dated the 4th of March 1982, which reports on the first annual conference of the Campaign for Diplomatic Relations with Albania.
Yes.
I want to look specifically at paragraph 3. I'm afraid I will read it. I will read it out. The conference was chaired by Dafydd Wigley, Member of Parliament and President of Plaid Cymru. His brief introduction, including apologies for absence from William Wilson MP, was followed by a speech from Professor Privacy, Chairman of CDRA, who outlined the current situation in which the United Kingdom and Albania do not have diplomatic relations with each other. The gist of the problem is that, following an incident in a minefield in Albanian coastal water, during which ships of the Royal Navy suffered casualties and damage, the Bank of England retains to this day a quantity of Albanian gold seized by the Allies for safekeeping during World War II. This unremarkable speech was followed by a similar effort from Stephen Calder, Secretary of CDRA, who laid more emphasis on the activities of the campaign, which had amounted to a small number of demonstrations and much writing of letters to newspapers. Finally, Privacy, Treasurer of CDRA, delivered what was little more than his personal vote of confidence for the efforts of the campaign. Can we now move to paragraph 5? This paragraph reads that the stated aims of the CDRA are ostensibly straightforward and stem from legitimate commercial and cultural aspirations. However, it is of interest that Stephen Calder is identical with Michael Chant, South London Regional Secretary of the Revolutionary Communist Party of Britain, Marxist-Leninist, and that approximately half of the persons remaining for the business part of the conference were current members of the party, or at least regular supporters of its meetings, in addition to Chant, Bland, 2 names redacted for privacy, another, and Tom Graham. Is it correct that Stephen Calder was an alias used by you?
That's correct. Yes, it was like my persona within it was overall it was known as the Albanian Society. The CDRA was a kind of campaign within the activities of the Albanian Society.
Was it common for those within the RCPB-ML to adopt an alias or a persona?
It was quite common at that time, yes.
Can you tell us why?
Yes, it was a question of security concerns. In adopting what were known as party names, we had the conception of guarding our identities from the state and not from the people we were working with politically. And one of the reasons it kind of faded away was we really realized that the state would know our identities anyway, as has been proved after all this time. And it is quite interesting that our suspicions at that time are sort of corroborated after all this period, which is quite interesting. But anyway, and that also the fact that generally speaking, the activists, the ordinary people we were working with, simply knew our party names, our aliases. So it didn't really achieve its objective. Nevertheless, you know, I'm not aware of kind of anyone else that had such a developed alter ego, if you like, a profile as myself in the Albanian society. I mean that was the it wasn't the fact that I was trying to conceal my allegiance or my involvement with RCPB-ML. In fact, that was known. It's developed over time that I would become very active within the Albanian society. While we're on the subject, perhaps I could mention also Tom Graham, who was widely known as John Mahag, and actually HN19 never mentions that name, but Tom was widely known as John Mahag because that was his pen name. It was a nom de plume. And I can't remember what I mentioned, but anyway, he retired as a building worker in 1955, actually to devote himself to writing, and it was roughly the same time as he came into contact with the party. So everyone knew him as John Mahag.
I see. So there were other members of the party who also used party names or alternative personas in their work with the party?
Yes, yes.
Mr. Chant, I want to ask you now a bit more about the organisation of the RCPB-ML. I'm going to ask to bring up your witness statement again. That's UCPI 36660, Sarah A1. And go, please, to page 38, paragraph 12.6, Roman numeral 1. Oh yes, so it's the 12.6 Roman numeral, the Roman numeral 1 that comes after 12.6, if that makes sense. Begins, this is what you've written, Mr. Chant. RCPB-ML is a democratic centralist organisation. I think you mentioned that at the start of your evidence. Democratic centralism is an organisational method applied by the Bolsheviks. In a nutshell, it effectively means democracy in discussion, centralism in action. Within a strategy of building a campaign and the party, there cannot be democratic centralism without dealing with the line of the party. And at paragraph Roman numeral 2, put simply, as a party, we discuss campaigns, strategy and tactics, and then after the maximum discussion, a decision is made, and the members follow that decision and campaign accordingly. Democratic centralism ensures the unity of the party and the full participation of its members. Can we now bring up a separate document, URN MPS 0729245, which, sir, is tab B32. And we just scroll down to, this is an intelligence report dated the 17th of August 1982, and it's described as a review of some aspects of the RCPB-ML. I want to go to paragraph 3 specifically, 3, and then I will move on. The RCPB-ML's recently published draft constitution demonstrates that in order to achieve the above aim, it's attempted to model itself from overall strategy to everyday terminology on the Russian Bolshevik Party. To the impartial observer, any comparison between the Russia of 1917 and present-day Britain may appear absurd, but whatever the incongruities, the RCPB-ML recognises essential similarities. Paragraph 4, one such perceived similarity is the belief in the ability of a small, highly disciplined organisation faced with the reality or the prospect of illegality to act decisively at the right time to change the course of a nation. Faint hearts who remain unconvinced by the Russian example are referred to the original 15 Albanian eagles who developed into the early 200-strong nucleus of the Communist Party of Albania. Compared with those 200, the RCPB-ML is said to be quite large. And we just go to paragraph 5. From their total conviction of the correctness of the historical analysis and from the anticipated persecution by the existing capitalist state, it naturally follows that comrades feel vulnerable and are highly security conscious. In practice, their fears are translated into a strict need-to-know policy, which conveniently complements the professed principles of democratic centralism, wherein central control all but totally excludes any element of genuine democracy. Thus, it is considered unnecessary and undesirable for the public, supporters, and even the mass of ordinary party members to know the identities of leading comrades or particular details of the party machinery. Meetings, which are open to the public, seldom attract participants from beyond the familiar circle of members, supporters, and contacts, but nevertheless it is understood that there are certain comrades who, to avoid the risk of exposure, seldom, if ever, attend such meetings. Mr. Chant, just that assertion at paragraph 5 that it is considered unnecessary and undesirable for the public, supporters, or ordinary party members to know the identities of leading comrades or particular details of the party machinery. Would you say that's accurate?
Not really. As I've sort of mentioned in connection with party names, it was never any intention to keep our identity from supporters and, as it says, the massive ordinary party members. These were security concerns, and if I may comment on that, those previous statements in the witness statement about democratic centralism. I mean, the tone is kind of meant to be quite conversational in that witness statement. In particular, my witness statement often talks about campaigns. I think that, like just focusing, as it were, on those two extracts on democratic centralism, it's not entirely appropriate to talk about campaigns as such. As I mean, whether or not one would agree with our party or not, it had a vision and still has a vision for a different type of world. So campaigns, yes, but it's not that we ever stood aside, as it were, from the people and thought, well, this is a campaign we should be involved in. Like in 1981, when we held the conference against racism and fascism in Conway Hall, as it happens. The hall was full. The fact is that we were part of the people's movement against racism and fascism, and the fact that so many people would come to a conference that the party had organised, I think proves that. Could I also just mention one other thing while I remember, which is on this question of violence or terrorism or I've just remembered something else, which I meant to say in connection with Tom Graham, if I may, which is that I think I began to talk about the 1978 Lambeth by-election,
yes,
where we used Tom Graham's address as the base for the party. In fact, in the middle of that campaign, there was a fire precisely at that address. Well, it wasn't just Tom Graham that had to be rehoused. There were a number of people living in that house, and so it was very dangerous. And our supposition was always that it was an act of the neo-Nazis to attack our party. The other connected, which is why I remembered it, the other connected point about the campaigns against racism was that we were part of the ordinary resistance. Like it's really important that the people are only too willing to resist. Our slogan was "Self-defense is the only way." There were many people in East London, which is dealt with in an earlier tranche, but that were part of this movement of self-defense. And I noticed in looking through HN19's submissions that I think it's there, that he includes a publication of the East London People's Front, which specifically has an article against terrorism and terrorist activities. Specifically, there were organisations suggested that they should set up vigilante groups against racists who were conducting racist attacks. We never agreed with this. We always said that it's the people who need to be mobilised.
Thank you. And just back to this document, Mr. Chant, from your helpful explanation, would it be fair to say that you often held meetings, like, for example, the conference you just referred to at Conway Hall, which were open to the public and attracted many members of the public, not just members of the party?
That's correct. I mean, not just meetings like that, but and HN19 refers to this sports and cultural festival in the sports events of which were held in Coventry, where many thousands of people participated, and there were local sports and cultural festivals also. We held a big cultural side of the festival in St Pancras Town Hall.
Yes, I think I will ask you some questions about that later,
okay.
actually. Yes,
Sorry.
I think we will come on to that. Just continuing with this briefly, I read earlier paragraph 4 where HN19 draws what he says is a similarity between the RCPB-ML and the Russian Bolshevik Party, the belief of a ability of a small, highly disciplined organisation faced with the reality or prospect of illegality to act decisively at the right time to change the course of a nation. Would you agree that that is a correct characterisation of the RCPB-ML beliefs?
Well, I think I say somewhere that it's not. Anyway, I'm saying it now, that wasn't really a question of beliefs in that sense. We would say now that the October Revolution in Russia was a crucial event. It opened the way for the world's first worker state and so on. And Lenin said, now we proceed to build socialism. So yes, we took heart from that, and also the example of Albania. But I think it's worth saying here also that I'm sure there's an implication somewhere in the documents that it shows that the party was committed to violence, if you like. But it doesn't even really deal with the situation in 1917.
So, if we refer to the specific words where it says that the circumstances where the party may have to act decisively at the right time to change the course of a nation, what would that decisive action look like? Are you saying that decisive action would not be something violent?
Well, we're looking at the situation of the party at that time and the world revolutionary movement at that time. The Leninist position was that for a revolution to occur, you have to have a crisis, and the fact that the ruling class, the ruling elite, whoever that is at the time, couldn't rule in the old way. So the party steps in, and in 1917 it was the fact that Russia was part of the First World War. We withdrew from that slaughter after the Bolshevik Revolution. So it's that type of important political intervention that's the crucial aspect. With the Bolshevik Revolution, it was the slogan of land, peace, and bread that was decisive. Now we wouldn't necessarily pose the question, I think, or the answer in the same way, in that we point out that the present political system is undemocratic in the sense that the people have no voice of their own in running the country, and I think part of the party acting decisively today we could characterize as formulating this conception of the necessity for new forms. As I said before, we very much focus on the necessity for democratic renewal. We don't necessarily say we have a revolution and establish socialism. It's the people's empowerment that is key.
And I appreciate that that's how you would explain it today, but in the period of time of this document in the early 1980s, would you say it was broadly a similar idea?
Well, as I say in the witness statement, I believe, that you're looking at the prospect of illegality, and like it was, I don't know whether it remains, a distinct possibility. I think we give the example of Chile in that. That it may be necessary, if the party is declared illegal. I mean, there are other ways of undermining the party, but it's envisaging that situation where actually it's not us that declares we're illegal, it's what happens from the state's point of view.
Mr. Chant, I'm going to move on to a different topic now. I'm going to refer you to your witness statement again, so please can we have UCPI 36660 and at page, I think, 46, paragraph 13.1. Yes, this page. This page you are talking, you're dealing with HN19, Malcolm Shearing. But I specifically want to look at paragraph 4 and 5. Just the one above, thank you, sorry. 4 and 5, yes. You say this. I recall that you're talking about the RCPB-ML, organised, along with others on the left, a counter-protest against a one-person march by Martin Webster, a leader of the National Front. The march was heavily protected by the police. It was effectively a stunt by Webster to draw attention to the National Front. I recall that the undercover officer Malcolm Shearing provocatively suggested an attempt to break through police lines to confront National Front leader Martin Webster. Had we followed this strategy, we would have been brutally assaulted by the police. Those who remember think that this was out of character of Shearing, and his suggestion was not taken up. We considered the suggestion adventurous, and it did not have any serious aim to it. Just very briefly to explore this, do you recall how many individuals were taking part in this counter-protest?
It's very difficult to be sure after this period of time. I would say, because it was I believe it was a fairly local event, so maybe a couple of thousand or 5 or 10,000, that kind of number.
And how about the members of the RCPB-ML? Were you all together, and do you remember roughly how many there were?
No, I don't remember. I mean, one reason for recalling the occasion at all, actually, is because of Malcolm Shearing's remark. It's about the only conversation, if you can call it that I recall having with him. I mean, there must have been others over the course of a couple of years, but it has stuck with me. Been shown that the reaction that it was a provocative suggestion is underlined. Yeah.
Do you know how many people heard this? Was this a conversation that you had one-on-one with Malcolm Shearing?
Yeah, it was just one-on-one, yes.
And you say you considered, was this really a serious suggestion? Do you think it was really a serious suggestion? Was it a throwaway comment? What was your impression of it?
Well, my impression was it was meant seriously. It was meant as an option for me to, and whoever was there to take up. Wasn't serious in the sense that it was obviously not a feasible, practicable proposal.
You say not feasible. Is it correct to assume that Martin Webster, the leader of the National Front, was surrounded by a large number of police officers on this occasion?
Sorry, yeah, that's why. Yes, yeah, and I mean, my memory may be faulty. I can't, I haven't been able necessarily to find a reference to this precise demonstration. My recollection that it was in the Kennington area, but that may be faulty. It's just I have this particular recollection of Malcolm Shearing, and I have a kind of mental picture of the situation when he mentioned it, with so many police officers around. I think it was simply Martin Webster on his own, but I may be wrong on that.
Thank you. We move on to a different document, still on the question of violence, as we've discussed earlier. You talked about the RCPB-ML having a slogan in reference to anti-fascist self-defence is the only way. Can I turn up document UCPI 18237, which is at tab B22, sir? This is an intelligence report dated the 4th of June 1982, reporting on plans for protest activities concerning the visit to Britain of President Ronald Reagan in June 82. And I just want to look at paragraph 4. I'll just read the paragraph. Attendance is by party members and supporters of recent demonstrations, the May Day March, Bobby Sands Memorial, and the Ad Hoc Committee for Peace in the Falklands, indicate that a maximum of 40 persons may be expected at any one event. Since the heady days of the party's forerunner organisation, the Communist Party of England, Marxist-Leninist, there have been few instances of involvement in overt violence and practices such as assaulting overly inquisitive photographers. However, the official line regarding attacks by fascists, which in this context includes police officers acting as implements of state oppression, is that active, indeed preemptive, self-defence is obligatory. Linking of arms and similar passive tactics are considered as no better than running away. Now, Mr. Chant, you explained to us earlier about the party's position in terms of confronting or blocking neo-Nazis and their position as regards anti-fascist activity, and you have told us about the slogan of self-defence. But perhaps just specifically with this document, is it correct that fascists, in the context which HN19 puts it, included police officers acting as implements of state oppression, and that preemptive self-defence being obligatory related also to police officers? Is that correct?
I don't recognise any of that really as party positions. I don't think I've seen that or been aware of that particular paragraph before. I think it gives a misleading impression of our stand. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to move on to the topic of front organisations. I say in quotes. I know that the term front is sometimes controversial. Can we turn up document UCPI 17057, which, sir, is at B1? This is an intelligence report dated the 5th of January 1981, reporting on a New Year celebration held by the party.
Can I just interrupt there, because the date is obviously not correct. It should be 1982. I noticed that before. It reports on something that happened in December 1981.
You're quite right. So it says that, yes, the event took place on the 31st of December 1981, so it follows that indeed the report should be dated the 5th of January 82.
Yeah.
Thank you. It says that this was a celebration, around 100 persons present, and at paragraph 3 goes on to list a number of groups which are associated with the RCPB-ML. Just briefly, at paragraph 3, Roman numeral 2, it lists the People's Democratic Front, the PDF, a broad-based anti-racist, anti-fascist organisation. At 3(3), the Preparatory Committee for a Revolutionary Women's Union of Britain. The paragraph below, for the Communist Youth Union of Britain. And then at 5, other party organisations such as the Trade Union Revolutionary Opposition and the Health Workers Association. Paragraph 4 says the following: it's clear from the above that the party is continuing its policy of launching quasi-autonomous organisations to carry out its various projects, rather than forming committees or subdivisions within itself. By this simple ploy, it hopes to minimise the risk of exposing its internal structure, whilst attracting significant numbers of useful helpers who may not necessarily be potential party members, but whose suitability may be considered at leisure and at a distance. Inevitably, most active comrades combine party membership with participation in such organisations. For example, Michael Chant, alias Steve, is South London Regional Secretary of the party, Secretary of the Albanian Society, and a member of the PDF. A name redacted for privacy, alias Privacy, is a spokesman for the TURO and the HWA, and the current record holder appears to be Privacy, alias Privacy and Privacy, whose activities include the party, the Progressive Cultural Association, the People's Democratic Front, the Health Workers Association, and the Revolutionary Women's Union of Britain. I am going to deal with some of these organisations shortly, but in general, would you say it's accurate to describe these organisations as quasi-autonomous of the RCPB-ML?
Well, it's not a term I think we ourselves would use. As I think I make clear somewhere, that these were mass organisations of the party in the sense that they represented various fronts of work, and in that sense they were united fronts or mass fronts. And so it's not that they were sort of underhand channels for recruitment to the party. I think that's the first thing to be said. So quasi-autonomous is a strange way of putting it. Certainly it's correct to say that they were inspired and initiated by the party, and RCPB-ML comrades were very active in them. But they had their program. And it's fair to say, I think, that because of the death of two of our leading comrades, 1981 and 1983 respectively, and the fact that the 1980s were a period where the world was going through a change, which everyone can see now, with the collapse of the Soviet Union and so on. These organizations didn't continue in the form of whatever quasi-autonomous organizations, which doesn't mean to say that the party stopped organizing on these fronts. But it concentrated on its own work, on its own activities, and so on.
I see.
Yeah.
So, what do you say about the suggestion made by HN19 that the reason for having the organisations was to conceal or minimise risk of exposing the internal structure of the RCPB-ML?
I think this is speculation on his part. It doesn't. It isn't borne out by the way the party and these organisations developed.
Thank you. Can we now move on to a document UCPI 16833, tab B9. UCPI 16833. And this is an intelligence report dated the 11th of December 81. And the report refers to a number of events held over the weekend of the 5th to the 6th of December of 1981 by groups associated with the RCPB-ML, specifically the Preparatory Committee for a Revolutionary Women's Union in Britain, the Progressive Cultural Association and the People's Democratic Front. Can we look at paragraph 5, please?
Can I just say at that point that HN19 sort of continuously refers to the women's organisation as the Revolutionary Women's Union of Britain. It was simply known as Women's Union of Britain. Yeah.
Yes, I did note that point. I was going to ask you, just perhaps whilst we're on it, then in that case, Mr. Chant, was it the case that that organisation was always called the Women's Union of Britain? It never had revolutionary in its name?
That's correct.
And was that a conscious decision to not use the word revolutionary that you're aware of?
It must have been a conscious decision, but not from the point of view that I don't think, not to in my experience, that someone suggested it and it was overruled. It was always known as the Women's Union of Britain.
Thank you. So paragraph 5 of this document is referring to a concert which I think was organised by the Progressive Cultural Association. The evening concert, which was attended by about 150 persons, was a great success, the most remarkable feature being the wide scope of entertainment offered. The PCA gave a typical esoteric performance of revolutionary songs from Albania, but there were also more conventional items from National Interest Skiffle Group, John Tilbury, a pianist, the Hole in the Wall Gang, an Irish folk group, and a Rastafarian poet. This drastic departure from purely revolutionary culture was a deliberate attempt by the People's Democratic Front to present itself as something other than just the latest RCPB-ML front organisation, and it was clear that party hardliners had, through much soul-searching, convinced themselves of the necessity for such an apparent compromise. However, it is doubtful whether any, or many, or indeed any, outsiders were attracted to the concert. Would you say it is accurate that the choice of performers on that occasion were chosen deliberately to avoid presenting the PDF as just a front of the RCPB-ML?
No, I'd say that that's not correct. Actually, the Rastafarian poet referred to was Benjamin Zephaniah, who later became very well known, and refused the Queen's honour. So no, these clearly the party has also attracted progressive musicians, and it was so in those days. It still is the case. Excuse me.
Mr. Chant, these events that were held by the PCA or the PDF, was there any practical impact of these events? Did it encourage membership of the RCPB-ML, from your memory?
It's a strange way of putting it, in that it probably didn't cross our minds that this was an opportunity to recruit people to RCPB-ML.
So not
HN19 seems very concerned, and maybe the undercover officers were similarly minded in this, that there are front organisations which, seek to hide the actual force behind them, and it seems to me to be written from that point of view. And it's interesting the way he talks about departure from purely revolutionary culture, as though that was deliberately going in a different direction. No, the fact is we've the party has always had good relations with progressive musicians. There was, you could say, revolutionary culture, which was specifically, Cornelius Cardew himself wrote quite a number of songs which are clearly revolutionary, and the founding of the party and so on.
There's clearly a link between the party and music from the very outset.
But the point I'm making is that these there were songs and music which were specifically for RCPB-ML and its circles, and then there's the wider progressive musicians, and this was I remember the occasion because I'm pretty sure this was the last concert. It's December 1981, isn't it? Before Cornelius Cardew was killed in December 1981. Yeah.
Can we move on to document UCPI 17190? This is at B13 of the bundle. Sorry, yes, UCPI 17190. It might be 17190-1. Yes, thank you. This is an intelligence report dated the 24th of February of 1982, which reports on another organisation, the Trade Union Revolutionary Opposition. If we go straight to paragraph 3, it's quite difficult to read, but I'm going to try. This organisation was formed by and consists mostly of members and supporters of the Revolutionary Communist Party of Britain, Marxist-Leninist. Its most conspicuous member, although not necessarily its most influential, is, I think that name is Stuart Munro. In typical RCPB-ML fashion, it claims to exist for the interest of the masses, but effectively excludes support by uncompromising extremism. For this reason, it is doubtful whether the TURO would be able, unaided, to mobilise sufficient support to pose a serious public order threat. However, the tenacity, personal plausibility, and known history of violence on the part of Munro and other RCPB-ML TURO members indicate a potential capacity for causing disturbances which cannot totally be disregarded. Firstly, Mr. Chant, were you yourself a member of the TURO at any point?
I don't believe so. These reports from HN19 always come at it from the point of view of whether these organisations are dominated by the party or not. And as I try to make clear in the witness report, this wasn't the way the party looked at them. They were organisations which, they were of their time, but it was like it still remains a task, for instance, to mobilise organised workers in the trade unions to take progressive stands, and how the trade unions should act effectively. I mean, these are pressing problems. These are similar problems that trade union revolutionary opposition was trying to deal with in its day. And I mean, I take particularly exception to the way it poses this issue of whether trade union revolutionary opposition is large or effective enough to pose a serious public order threat, because this was never any objective of either the party or these mass organisations. And it strikes me that indeed the question of public order had a, I mean, I say we've never been for fomenting public disorder or threatening public order in the way that these undercover police officers pose the question. Public order in very much in those days meant that things, had reached a certain stage in history. You had an authority which should be recognised, and opposition to this was a threat to public order. I don't think that was part of our thinking then or now.
Thank you. Next document I want to bring up, UCPI 5992. UCPI 15992, which is at B37. And this intelligence report dated the 10th of December of 1982. It's another report of a concert held by the PCA, but I want to take you specifically to paragraph 4, where HN19 reports, the only item of interest during the proceedings was an announcement that earlier in the day a National Front meeting in Gravesend had been broken up by a contingent of, is it Hind Mazdoor Lahar, the RCPB-ML's Asian Front organisation. Apologise if I have pronounced that incorrectly. But firstly, Mr. Chant, is it right that that organisation, Hind Mazdoor Lahar, was an Asian Front organisation of the RCPB-ML? Would you have described it that way?
No, I wouldn't. Hind Mazdoor Lahar means Indian Workers' Association, as I recall. I know there were activists of the party who were active in HML, as we used to refer to it, in Mazdoor Lahar.
Would it have the same status as a group such as the PCA or the PDF in terms of its relation to the party?
I'm not sure that it would be correct to say that. To my recollection, I don't think it was set up in the same way on the initiative of RCPB-ML. Certainly, as I say, party comrades from Punjab and probably Pakistan were involved in it.
Thank you. Mr. Chant, we've talked about several of these front organisations, or these organisations related to the RCPB-ML. And you've said that it wasn't something that you would have particularly considered at the time, whether or not you would be able to recruit new members from these fronts. That wasn't, I think you said in evidence, that wasn't really the purpose of them. What do you say to the suggestion that the RCPB-ML used these front organisations to conceal the true number of its membership?
Conceal from whom? I mean, if it's concealing the numbers from the state, I don't think these mass organisations would assist if it was concealing them from the public. See, I think from my grasp of what HN19 is saying is that he tries to have it both ways. You know, when there's a meeting he goes to that has only a small number of people, he says the party is an ineffective organisation, it's past its heyday, and so on and so forth. When you have events, meetings, cultural events, sports events where thousands of people turn up, he says, well, this must be a way of concealing the numbers of the party. It's not the way of looking at it. I mean, we've always, you know, whether it's understood or not, we've always regarded ourselves as at the forefront of the people's movement, you know, working to move history forward, if you like. And we've never agreed with this idea. It's mentioned in a footnote somewhere in the witness statement of the idea that this is now the end of history. We've reached the ultimate kind of society. So all these activities are part of, you know, building the new outlook, building the new organisations, the unity of the people, their determination to move from the old to the new. What is could call a modern Enlightenment movement. I mean, we think of communism as the Enlightenment movement of our day, as you know, as opposed to the Scottish Enlightenment or that period. And I mean, I, speaking personally, of course, I was always very inspired by these activities, and it always kind of surprised me that figures like Malcolm Shearing were so cynical and dismissive of them, and thought it correct to. I mean, there are requests from the security service for names of musicians that, for instance, there's a case with the Albanian Society, I think, it was, asking HN19 to find out who this musician was that was interested in Albanian music. There's you know, the interest on whether I was moving house and whether that would interfere with the work of the Sports and Cultural Festival and so on. It's difficult to empathise with that mindset, and it's just one more example which shows how in the present this kind of interference in the political affairs of the people should be banished from the way the state works.
Thank you, Mr. Chant.